Welcome YouTube. Welcome back campaigners. This is Campaign Terrain. I'm your host, Cross. And today we're going to be taking some of that pretty much indestructible EVA we've been using. Mostly in this playmat, the sort of puzzle pieced edge ones. We're going to be making a cliff wall. We're going to be making this one here today on a video. This is the one I had in previous videos. You might have seen that. So I'm going to emulate a lot of this in this. So it's going to have the texture. I'm going to include a couple of bonus pieces for it. We're going to make another cave entrance. There's not one on here. There is on here. We're going to make one today. And I've also got an entire bonus hill to go with it. And I'll show you all that. Hope you come along for the ride. There's going to be a bump here in a second. During that bump, please remember to like, share, subscribe. And I'd really like it if you click on some of those other links and help out the channel a little. That would be excellent. But there's no pressure on that. I'm just happy you're here along for the ride. So again, this is Campaign Terrain. I'm Cross, and today we're making indestructible cliff walls. See you in just a second. Thanks for coming. I'm going to start with the largest pieces and work my way in. So I'm going to be doing work with this yellow playmat. It looks like this. It's got the puzzle all the way around all four sides. You can also start with one of the floor mats, but they are larger. They're going to have a wider spread. And for the back wall, we're going to need pieces on both sides. So just be aware that if you're using the 2-foot wide mat, you're going to have to make each of your pieces that wide. Back wall, we're going to take all of the puzzle pieces off of one side. Now, that always leaves this little nib right here sticking out on this last piece. We're taking it off too. So we're going to go all the way across on that and take that off. So, line up your straight edge. Nice sharp knife. All the way across, keeping that as vertical as you can. If you don't get all the way through, a second pass is fine. And take all those, including that little corner we cut off. So those all go in a bin. Now for the back wall, we want to flip it to the opposite side. Do not take off these two. Only take off the opposite sides, two of them. Again, straight edge, sharp knife, vertical cut, nice and slow. I showed you how to do this in last week's video. So that's those cut off. Now, these are symmetrical all the way around, 4 ways. So this hook and this hook are going to be the same. And this gap are going to be the same. And that works out for us really well. So I'm going to take one of my ones I did previously, which is here. Make sure I get this the right way. This top edge is this side where I took everything off. Now, as you see, that all fits together, so I'm just making sure that this is all going to work. As long as we keep the top edge being the cut edge being our top edge, they'll all work together. I want to come halfway across this, which is, you can't really see it on this mat, but that is 15 inches. Because this is 12 across this white, and then there's 3 more here. But I want to come 7.5 inches, which is right here. Put my straight edge down. You want to make sure, see this little corner right here is going to match the one that's on this side that I'm going to cut off both of those. Again, sharp knife, vertical hold, nice, slow cut, keep it pressed against the straight edge and vertical. And you want to go all the way through, including that little nib at the end. We now have 2 identical pieces that will fit together. And once you put a cover on, or a texture on those or whichever, you've got a whole wall that'll stand up for you. For the rock texture, we're going to start with a whole piece, or if you have any offcuts, you can use them. I've got some over here, so you can see what I'm talking about. But let me show you 2 different ways to do this. On this one, the one I did that you've already seen in a previous video, it's the same height, or stands proud from the face, the same amount all the way across. I started all of these on 1 inch and used the same thickness for all of those. On this new one I'm doing, I'm creating a bit of a hill, So that is going to come out and attach to a much larger hill, which you'll see later in the build. So each of these offcuts, you'll notice this is the same number here as here. These offcuts are the cutoffs of these. So the top half are all a 1/2 inch. The bottom half each come out by 1/4 inch. So to get this first 1/2 inch piece, I started with a 1¼ inch piece and drew my line on it. You'll see what I mean by a line in a moment. I showed it in previous videos, but I'll show you again. And on the next one was 2 inches, the next one was 2¼ the next was 2½, and each one I took off a 1/2 inch, and that left this strip here because I knew that that was going to make my flat part of my wall. And each of these comes out 1/4 inch. What I would do is I would take this and a pen, any marker, any pencil, doesn't matter, whatever works for you. Now I'm going to mark these at a 1/2 inch. So I just line that up with my grid, or however you want to do it. I make a notch, a mark at the 1/2 inch point, and a mark at the 1/2 inch point. I then take the straight edge, line that up, and this is not the time for cutting. This is all marking still. Take that, and that's just to give me a rough idea where I'm going. So we're going to take that line and literally just start to take small chunks out of that, and you can either drag the pliers down the line like this, which will create a sort of broken up texture, and you can do that several times and you will get through it, or you can take the pliers and actually tear chunks out as you go. This takes a lot longer. If you have a little bit sharper pliers, little pointier tip, they are going to give you a quicker method through here. And this is not rocket surgery. This is jabbing things with a piece of metal. We're only going about 1/3 of the way through on each cut. So dragging that through. I like to switch directions on it. On this last time through, you're going to get partway through on most of it, but not all of it. But it's going to leave you enough room to where you can then fold it back on itself, and that's going to give you a line on the other side. So you can keep going through the same direction you were, or you can swap sides on it and just follow that bent line, that folded line. And at some point, you're either going to pull all the way through it, which is fine, or you're going to get frustrated and grab it and yank it apart, which is also fine. And you get the rocky look. Now, these are rounded off at the corners. You can see all these are rounded off the edge. Same thing on that. You just decide how far you want it rounded off. Make yourself a little mark if you want. Make yourself a line if you want. And then same thing. Now let's talk about style on this. I've made mine go all the way across. Looking at it, I will not be doing that again. I will be breaking that up. If you look at my one I did previously, it's got some breaks and gaps where I've just torn it apart and rounded off into there. And it gives it a lot more natural look to it. A lot more realistic look on the table. Okay, so we've got the wall I was making, and I've measured it, and this comes out to close enough to exactly to be 5 layers left at the bottom of the particular foam I'm using. Depending on what foam you're using, that variance is going to be different. If you look at this yellow foam, it's coming out almost perfect right at the top, and 5 layers will be almost perfect right to the bottom. The main trick is just to keep them level, or if you're building them at an angle so they look like certain types of rocks, keep them all lined up with each other. Don't let them get all crooked. Okay, so I decided that I wanted this to have difficult terrain, impassable terrain, unless you've got special skills, and a hill that can either be used for a vantage point or may be large. You could swap them out and have something big enough to fit a building on, something like that. But I decided I'm just going to have a low enough slope that characters can get up to this point with relative ease. So what I did is took a first piece, didn't really measure this one, eyeballed it, went, okay, that's that wide, that's fine. And I took this piece and placed it on there and drew a little circle for where I wanted my hill edge to be at. Then each of these other pieces I made a little bit larger. to make sure that I didn't undercut any of the edges of my hill, I marked the edges. This one starts at 1 inch and then slopes out this way. This one starts at 2, slopes out this way. This one starts at 3, and each side, that way my sides are still going to be solid and flush with each other. Now, for these, I am not following this texture. I am following this texture that I used for the hill and the rock previously. So I'm going to be using a different method of cutting these. So I'm going to take each of these and, again, sharp knife. And you can use whatever knife that you're comfortable with doing this. I like the flexibility of these snap blades. I can get the nice curvature I want. Now you can rip it off for a more rough look right now if you want. And in fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. So, got these nice curved edges here because I angled the knife out. Then I'm going to take a pair of shears or scissors and just sort of round those off a little. Now I am wanting these to be more hills than actually rocks. So this one is like layers of rocks with grass on it. I'm going to try to make this one a little more sloped, but it's going to have essentially the same edge as this piece here. So I'm going to take the scissors. I showed that in last week's video, so you can go back and watch that. I've got most of those smoothed off, ready to go. I'm going to glue this last layer on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this layer flat on the surface and use the surface to ensure that it's flat as I glue the next piece on. Normally, I would use a spray adhesive for this, but it has been raining outside here, and so the stuff smells too bad to bring inside, and the humidity really messes with it when it's raining. So I'm going to use hot glue. This makes it a little bit more complicated. I suggest spray glue on this, the adhesive. Normally, I use it on low temp, and I tell everybody to use it on low temp because 2 reasons. It's less dangerous, and it stands less chance of melting like XPS foam. You're not going to melt this with hot glue. On high temp, it's going to be fine. It won't melt the foam. It will melt you. Don't get your hands into the hot glue. Let it cool for a few seconds. Even if you see it oozing out and you're worried about wiping it off, let it cool for a second. The only way I found to do this and get all the way across an expanse this large is to take a line, draw a straight line of hot glue, and do that area and press it down, and then lift and do the next area and lift and do the next area, and at the end go around the lip. That's sort of a long process, so I'm going to get ready to do that, and then that's going to be the next clip, and it's going to be sped up a lot so you can see how I do that. All right, let's get to gluing. Again, high temp for this. I normally use low, but high temp is good for this. And I'm going to take a straight line across. Got those all glued into place. Have a couple of areas where they don't meet up very well. So you can take scissors, knife, whatever works for you, and trim those to fit. Remember, if you do it in like long, slow cuts, you're going to end up with a really man-made looking texture. So sometimes you want to use smaller, shorter cuts for this to simulate the rock texture, which is what I'm trying to do here. So that is our hill. And our hill is going to attach to our wall just by sitting there. You can, if you want, use magnets to attach that. You can use Velcro or hook and loop tape or duct tape or double stick tape or glue or however you want. You can attach that if you want, or you can just leave it separate. I'm going to leave it separate because that way I can use the hill with different things. I'm not sure what else I could use this with, but I'll find something. So those two are going to go together like this. So that is pretty much finished building on this. Now, to keep this to where I can use it by itself without the hill, it needs to have these supports at the back, as I talked about before. And I got those ideas from Sean Townley, so go check out his channel. I've linked to it a couple times before, just in case. Hopefully I'll remember to put it up there in the corner. From earlier, we know that this piece is 7.5 inches tall. So and I know that this is not quite a full 1/2 inch thick when you look at it according to the two little dots here on that mean 1/2 inch on my board. So I know this is not quite a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to cut this at 7 inches. That way I know that it won't quite stick up over the top. And there's the piece I'm going to use for that. Now I'm going to come 1 inch in on each of these. Just cut diagonal from that corner to that corner. Now it looks like I made this one a little bit wider than I made the one last time, so I'm actually going to taper this off a little. I'm going to fix this a bit here. Okay. Now these two uprights are going to go here on the back of this. I need a couple of 2-inch pieces to be the bases for it. So this is why they're 2 inches. So I'm going to take that, and anything that'll work as a straight edge will work. Does not have to be perfect. That's what I'm trying to show you here. You can do these in no time flat. Take the one we just cut. Use it as a guide. And cut us a second one. Now, on this one, just because I like it stylistically, I've rounded off these corners. So I'm going to do that again. I want to take one of my upright pieces and one of my brace pieces at the bottom and put those together. I'm going to sort of get near the center of this. It doesn't really have to be perfect, so pretty much that's where I want my line of glue to go. Now at this point, since we're not covering as much ground, you can switch that back to low temp if you want. You don't want to go up the long piece yet. That's going to be when we put it on the back. Just this bottom edge. Take that, press that into place, and make sure that they are flush this way so that they make a good fit on the back of the wall piece. So press that in until it catches, starts to cool off, and repeat with the second one. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and attach these. I want a straight line. I'm going to leave about a 1/2 inch here, just so it's not right at the corner, just here. And then I'm going to move it over just a little. Use the mark to show where I'm going to put the glue at. Glue along the back of the base and the back of the upright. And press into place. Now, I definitely want to make sure that sits at the bottom of the wall. I want the bottom of the wall and the bottom of the base to sit flush with each other. Let that sit long enough to cool off. I'm going to get the other one in place, and once that's cool, I'll come back and work on the ledge to hold your dice. Let's make a dice box. You can decide how large you want that to be. I'm going to go with 1.5 inches. That's what I did last time, I believe. Yes, 1.5 inches. And that platform is going to be 1.5 inches and then have a piece glued on the outside of it. That is our bottom. You can decide how high you want it to be. This one was at this height just because I built this cave entrance into this wall, and so I needed a little bit of clearance there, so I put it maybe a little lower than I necessarily would have, but it worked out well because the lower you put this, the better center of gravity you're going to have, especially once you get a set of dice or some pens, that sort of thing in it. So then we have to decide how long we're going to make it to fit between the uprights. Now I have, wow, couldn't have done that again if I tried. That was a complete accident. But I don't want it fully that whole width because I need to know where to put the supports underneath it for up on here. On the other hand, we can go ahead and do it that way, and that will make it fit all the way into that. Now I'm still going to put a support in here just to keep it upright there, and then measure here as well. That is going to be just a little snug. So I'm going to take the 1/16 of an inch off of there. Can't believe how close that got on accidentally on the first try though. So it's going to need a front wall as well. I'm going to take this one that I was working on earlier and cut the same size off of that, and I'm just going to use it as a gauge. Do it on the front edge of the inside of the box. Now, this particular mat has that pattern on it, that Child's Play pattern, and that's been heat pressed in there, so it makes that side a little tougher. So I'm putting that inside the box so it doesn't get scratched up by Dyson pins and such. I'm going to take that and press that into there, and by the time I glue it in, I'm going to put a bead of glue on the inside here and the outside here, and I won't actually need side walls. I'm not too worried about getting this level or straight. I'm just getting close because it does not have to be level. It's just going to hold pins and dice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these and I'm going to cut some uprights to fit under here. I'm just going to cut 2 and place them here and here, and I'll have those glued in. So when you see me next, I'll have those done, and I'll show you how to make the cave entrance. So I mocked up a little wall to use to stand in for this, since I'm not putting a cave entrance into this one, but I'm going to show you how I did it. I took a figure and I decided how tall I wanted the cave entrance in comparison, and so I want 6 levels. This is 5. So what I did is I took, and I knew that I wanted them done with that ripped texture, and I wanted them slightly rounded. So I made a little template where to rip along this line, and then both of these. I made more than I needed. I've done along a straight line on all of them. Then I've done along the curved or rounded or angled edge on all of them, except this one. And so I can show you. Then, same deal. Take your pliers and just rip that texture into that so that you get that rocky texture into the foam. So then I'm taking them, and I like to keep them all the same direction. You don't have to. So I've been putting all of the pattern side down and the flat side up. So I'm going to take my hot glue, cover the entire side, and press into place, making sure to line up the back flat, because that's going to be the part against the cliff wall. Okay, we're going to let that cool for a second while we decide exactly where we're going to put it on our wall. Normally we'd have a whole wall to play with. Right now we're just using this little mock-up, so I know I'm going to center it, I know it's going to be at this level, and I know that I want it to be just shorter than this height. So I need to measure this. I can either place it against it and just make a mark, or I can measure it and find out how tall we're needing to be. And this is exactly 2.5 inches, so I'm going to want to go about 2.25 inches. So I can then take something and measure 2.25 inches up from the bottom on that and make a mark. And that's going to be the top of our doorway. Now, I also need to figure out where the sides are going to be. Now, if I'm working on a whole cliff wall and it's off center, that may differ. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and center it. And rather than measure it, I'm just going to make a mark here on each side. And I know it needs to be about 1/2 inch in from each of those marks. So I'm just going to take that and eyeball that and go, that's my door. Okay, here's where it starts to get a tiny bit tricky. The bottom of the door, the what would be considered the sill of the door, the bottom edge needs to be flush with the level you're coming in from. Coming up that line, across the top, and down that line, you want to angle inward. You want the back of the door to be narrower than the front of the door. You want to angle that in toward the middle. if you get multiple cuts where you end up with things like that, that's not going to matter, because we are then going to take that and trim it off just a little to make sure that there's room for a figurine to stand in the, a minifigure to stand in the doorway. So we want that to be at least the inch of that base width, or if you design this for giants, you want it to fit a 40mm base, whatever. But that needs to be the width of the base of the figure that needs to use the door. So now that door is flat on the bottom and angled in on the top and back. So we're going to take one more scrap, and we want to put that on the back of the door, taller than the door. So we're going to take it the same height as the door rather than the angle. And that's going to be the latch that holds our door in place. Now I have found that these are a little bit easier to get in there if you take that inner top corner off just a little. So take scissors or a knife and just take off that piece straight across so it's beveled like that. Okay, take that, center it on your door, glue it in place. That's pretty straightforward, so we'll just run a couple beads of glue on there and center that. You want to make sure it's lined up with the bottom of the door so that the whole thing stands upright. Now, we're going to let that cool for just a second. Meanwhile, we're going to double check that that's going to cover our door. Good, we're in good shape there. That shows the whole thing is covered there, whole thing is there. So now, this needs to be centered onto this piece, also flush with the ground. Oops, I have that upside down. This way, and the whole thing needs to be upright and centered. So, we know the door is narrower than the rock, so we're not putting the glue on the rock, we're putting the glue on the door. So we're going to take that, center it on the back, make sure top to top, bottom to bottom, and that it lines up at the bottom, and we have that pretty well centered. And that is your cave entrance. Done and complete. So, as you can see, it blocks it off. If you have a whole cliff wall here, you may not even use the cave entrance, or you may say they have to find the cave entrance, whichever. So, when you're ready, just pop that out, and you can go in and out of the cave. When you're done, or if you don't need it, or if you're not using it for that scenario, plug it right back in, good to go. There you have it. Rock wall, dice tray on the back, uprights to keep it stable, additional hill to go with it if you want, how to make your own cave entrance for them. Lots of good stuff in this one. Lots of adventures for your little guys to have. I hope you've been enjoying this. I hope we've been inspiring you. So let me know if you've been enjoying it. Leave some comments down below. Remember to like, share it, subscribe. There's going to be some links down there that can also help up the channel. And I really want to know how, if you're building any of this stuff, I'd love to see it. So let me know where I can see some pictures of you. Got an Instagram or anything like that. And I'll see you next week. Thank you for coming. This is Campaign Terrain. I'm your host, Cross. I love you. And until next time, I wish you luck in your campaign. Thanks for coming.